Hi, good morning. Okay. If there are any questions on regression that we did yesterday, we'll take up those questions. Otherwise, we will proceed with the next topic, which is classification. So let's see what we were doing in regression. Regression was trying to estimate the value of certain things when we have the information about the attributes of that particular object available. In the case of the houses, I had the attributes available, how many rooms, how many bedrooms, and other attributes. And we were trying to estimate the price of the house. So two things are very important to note is that in this case, I have the features available and I also have the labels available. It means that I have the information about the attributes of the object, and to be able to design the estimator, I have the expected output or the actual data also available for some past period. So I had information already available for 20,640 different houses for which the estimation was done earlier, for which the transaction had taken place earlier. So I had the past data available, and that data which I have available, it contains both features as well as the label or the X values as well as the Y values. So that's one criteria. And that kind of analysis, where I have both the features available as well as the label available, is called the supervised learning in terms of the machine learning or the machine learning enabled data science. We call that process as the supervised learning. So regression is one of the types of supervised learning. It means that we can run regression as an algorithm only if I have the data which contains both the features as well as the labels. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria is that these labels that we have, it must be continuous in nature. And by that, what we mean is that it can take infinite number of values. It's not certain fixed amounts that, no, not certain fixed categories or not certain fixed values, but these amounts can be infinite or continuous in nature. So when we do the estimation for the pricing, although in real life we may eventually round off the number, but the estimation that we can do, the price of the house could be anything. It could be going into decimals. It could be, you know, 100,001, 100,002. So the number of values that it can take is continuous in nature, or it can be any number. It is only in those cases that we use regression. But there would be several types of use cases or several type of or several scenarios in the real life where the what we are trying to estimate is going to be only a defined number of categories. That part is called classification. So here also I have the attributes, I have the labels, but these labels are not continuous in nature. These labels are defined categories. And if those categories are only two, For example, if we want to categorize a person as whether he is my likely customer or not, whether he would buy a certain product from my e-commerce website or not, then it's a binary classification which could be yes or no based on certain features of, say, if we want to find out, say, uh, whether the user is a male or a female, that's a binary classification. And there could be several other classifications where the categories that we would like our data to be put into, that could be more than two. It could be any number, but it is still a defined number. It can be a large number, but it has to be a defined number. It can't be a continuous number. In that case, we call it multi-class classification. So each of these items can be put into one of these classes. So for example, if we want to put our customers into five different categories and say that this customer is excellent, very good, good, bad, very bad, in that case, we are trying to put a given customer into one of these five classes. That is called a multi-class classification. So when we do the classification, it can be a binary classification, it can be a multi-class classification. In some cases, as we will study later, to start with, we will limit ourselves to doing the classification into binary or multi-class. Then later on, we'll also see the multi-label classification. What it means is that the same object can fall into more than one categories, or the same object can have more than one labels. So in the multi-class, let's understand this difference once again. So in the multi-class classification, one object could be put into one of the several classes. So one customer can be either excellent or very good or good or any of the other categories that we have, but it can't be simultaneously good or bad, good and bad. That is not possible. So one object will fall into only one of these classes. That's what the multi-class classification is. Multi-level classification is that one object that we are analyzing, it can fall into more than one category. So that's the multi-level classification, and it is very widely used in the, when we do the object recognition in the images. One image may have faces of different people. One image may have a human being, a cat, a dog, or a tree. So what we want to classify is that given the image, what are the objects? And since one image can have more than one object, and so my classification that we are doing, it will have the labels as a cat, dog, tree, car, child. And since one image can have more than that, it will fall into a multi-level classification. So if the image contains only a cat, then it will go into only cat. But if the image contains both cat and dog, it is possible that two of the labels are present in the image. So that's the multi-level classification. Now, this process can be used in several scenarios, and some of the common scenarios that you have already witnessed in your real life is like, say, spam filter. When you receive the email in Gmail or Hotmail, it does the spam filtering automatically. So in the Gmail, it puts into some what I see in my Gmail, and there might be certain settings to do that, is that it puts the mail into three different categories. One is the inbox, where the system filters out those mails which it considers as the um, appropriate mails. Then it puts that into social, which is coming from different social media, and then it puts it into promotion. So different promotion mails which come that you should buy this, or you should buy this, or this is the offer, this is the offer. All that is put into the promotion. So in that case, the Gmail is doing a multi-class classification of a given email that we receive. If it is only categorizing into inbox and spam, then it becomes a binary class classification. If it is doing things like, say, inbox and social and promotion and others, then it's a multi-class classification. So we are already seeing how the algorithms are doing different types of classification exercises, and we are witnessing that already. Similarly, it is being used extensively in document classification. Briefly, we had touched upon earlier that how Microsoft has replaced a lot many journalists from their news desk, and the job is now being done by the robots, enabled by the machine learning algorithms. So what happens as one news article comes in, now it has to be classified into what kind of news article it is. So in this case, it could be a multi-level classification because the same news item could be talking about more than one thing. So for example, there is an article which is talking about, say, impact of COVID on GDP, and how different leaders of different countries have reacted, or what policy decisions they are taking. In that case, that particular news article could be categorized as pertaining to economy. The same article is talking about, since different leaders are talking about what are their policies, it could also be falling into politics. And since it is also talking about COVID, it could also be categorized as healthcare, depending upon how extensively it talks about these three topics. But the example is that in these cases, a multi-label classification could be done. Or, so depending upon the content of the document, it could be either falling into one class, or it could be falling into multiple classes. So that's the utility of document classification. Spam filter we have talked about. Image classification we talked about. Also in handwriting recognition. So after seeing certain samples of the handwriting, if I see a signature or if I see a letter written by someone, can we classify who the author is? That's the handwriting recognition, and it's all left to your imagination as to where all the classification as a model can be used. So we'll go further into classification today, and we'll try out one of the examples in the notebook. Before we move there, let's spend some more time on classification. So the real life uses and some of the examples I am giving here. The customer could give you the assignment that here I am giving you the customer data, or the project could be that you have obtained the customer data, and then you need to assess that whether a customer is likely to switch from your service to some competition service. So for example, Vodafone could be interested, or now they have renamed themselves as VI. Yesterday they have launched their ads that now Vodafone Idea would be known as VI. So if VI wants to assess that which of my customers are likely to switch, and that switch could be possibly to Geo. So if they want to make an assessment, then how would they actually assess? So they will have the entire database of users. They will see the usage patterns. If they see that either somebody is not using the Wi-Fi network, or if their uses of the phone and Wi-Fi or 3G services is going down on a continuous basis, then those are the customers usually more likely to switch. Where they are not seeing any change in the UJS pattern, possibly those are the customers which will stick to them. Or there could be certain other categories, like they already have data about which are the customers who have switched in the past, and they find that those customers which are into the lower value bracket, they are the most likely to switch because of the free offers and things like that. The point I'm trying to make is that this is one of the very important scenarios, whether for a service provider, they would like to know that they would like to catch the early signs that who are the vulnerable customers, and therefore they can reach out to them with some offer, or they can reach out to them for service call or giving some freebies. That's what the kind of action could be done based on the classification. So you have got the data, and that's the role that data scientist would play, is that inform the sales team that here are the list of the vulnerable people. Why don't you focus on that one if you want to um, reduce the changeover from VI to Geo. It could also be used, or it is actually being used inside the organizations also, where based on again certain data points about the employees, HR should be able to estimate that who are the people who are likely to leave the company, and therefore if they want to reduce the attrition, then the system would be able to predict that these are the employees which are most likely to leave, or these are the employees which are um, should be contacted for showing the right path in the organization, or for some hike, or at least to understand their grievances and things like that. On the same vein, uh, on the same line, if somebody is there in the e-commerce website, then identification that is he a prospective customer or not, and if he is, then which are the products that he's likely to buy, will start showing the promotion and offers on that product. Insurance companies use these things for identifying that whether a customer should be sent for medical checkup or not. So they will have certain data about the customers on parameters of customers' health, age, gender, and so on. And based on that, they can make a estimation whether they should be sent for a medical checkup or not, and that saves them a lot of time and money, because every medical checkup is a cost to the insurance company. And therefore, based on some classification exercise, if they're able to reduce the number of people who are going to be sent for medical checkup even by say 20%, it's a substantial saving to the insurance company, because they issue hundreds and thousands of policies every day. Classification is also relevant for the banks, where based on the data about the income, education, what kind of job the person is doing, the consistency of job, the amount of salary he earns, what are the other loans that he has, the banks are able to make a decision that if a person has made an application for a loan, whether he should be given a loan or not. In fact, today it is being used to a large extent. So only those cases which either fall into the gray categories, where the machine is saying that, based on the data which I have about this person, uh, based on the algorithms, it is difficult to make out that whether a loan should be given or not. In that, so those gray cases will go to the human beings. Rest of the cases where the algorithm is fairly confident that whether the loan should be given or not given, decisions could be taken. So obviously, the wherever the system categorizes that loan should be given to person A or B or C, those things are still being scrutinized by the loan officer. So loan officer looks into only those cases where the system says or algorithm says that loan should be given, because he has to go through a manual process of confirmation. And the second one, where the confidence level in the algorithm is not very high, so those cases fall into the gray area, and those cases will also be given to the bank officer. But if this is algorithm itself is able to decide which are the person where based on the past data, the algorithm is very confident that loan should not be given. Now, the bank saves a lot of time in eliminating those or discussing those or trying to process those data. So it saves a lot of time for the banks. Now, if you see, the same process has been taken many steps further in China, and China, as we know, that is nowadays substantially advanced in the use of AI in day-to-day life, even more than US and Europe. So in China, the use of artificial intelligence in daily life, in the business life, has been taken to a level where other countries will take many years to reach. So in China, some of the experiments which are already happening is, we talked about the loan system. So based on the face recognition, they can identify who you are, and then the algorithms runs very fast in the backend. So for example, if you're walking into ATM, so this is ATM, you can withdraw only that money which you have in the account. So let's call this is a loan ATM. So you have an ATM, and as you enter uh, that room where that loan ATMs are located, the system itself reads your knows who you are based on face recognition. Then it will fetch out all the financial data and the other type of data which is going into the model. It will fetch out all that immediately online because you have the interfaces with all these databases. It will run the algorithm, make the prediction that whether a loan can be given to you or not. It will also find out that how much of loan can be given to you based on the previous loans that you have taken and based on your borrowing capacity. And as you walk to the ATM, then it will, and if you are eligible for certain loans, either it can be that right can be immediately transferred to the amount can be either transferred to your uh, bank account, or you could actually withdraw. So there is no need for any physical loan processing, waiting for the certain verifications to happen and loan being given to you in 3 days time, or if it is a larger amount like housing loan, it may take even longer to process and approve. None of that kind of thing is required because all the data is available. And as you walk from the door to the ATM machine, the entire process has been done. You can just go to the ATM and either withdraw the money or the money can be transferred to your bank account. So that kind of thing is already being done. And in the backend, if you see, there are two things happening. One is that whether the loan can be given to you or not. So that's the classification exercise. And how much of a loan can be given to you, that would be a regression kind of problem. Okay. Classification would also be used nowadays in the predictive maintenance, or whether a machine is likely to fail over the next 1 week or next 1 month or not, based on different parameters of the machine. For example, when was the last maintenance? Maybe the visual inspection of the machine, which can be done by the robots. So it can take the images of the machines or different parts of the machine. Those images can be processed. For example, uh, if you see on the train tracks, the condition of the rail, the condition of the fasteners of the rail, the condition of the tie on which the rails sit, all of these things are getting manually inspected. And that's a very tedious process because you have thousands of kilometers of the rail line and somebody has to go and inspect that manually. Now, some of the solutions which rail companies are experimenting with is that if I fit a camera at the bottom of one of the rails, then as the rail is moving, it can take the photographs, and those photographs are transmitted to a centralized system. Now, from those photographs, by analysis of those photographs, we can come to a conclusion that whether a fastener or a tie or a condition of the rail itself or the fish plates that you have which join the two rails. What is the condition of those rails? I mean, all those parts, and whether a predictive maintenance is required or not. So that's a use in maintenance of the fixed assets, the maintenance of the rolling assets. Similarly, you could assess that whether a wheel or a braking system or an axle that requires maintenance or not. Similarly, based on different medical readings that we have, whether the person, which kind of disease a person has, that could be found out. So that could be a binary classification that whether a person has a cancer or not, or you could take it to another level that whether the person has a cancer or a heart disease or a lung disease. So that could be a multi-class classification. And in the Netflix and the other sites that you use, it does the classification of the genre of a song or a movie or an article, whether it's an action movie or a social movie or a family, or a romantic movie. All these things are being done all by classification algorithms. So, as a data scientist, we need to ask the question that under what circumstances I will use the classification algorithm and under what circumstances I would use the regression algorithm. So, just to summarize once again, first of all, for running these two algorithms, I must have the data about the attributes as well as the data about the expected outcome or the labels. Second is that we study the what kind of output or what kind of values the Y can take. So if that value is a continuous value, like the price or how much loan can be given, then it would be falling into a regression category. But if the Y labels are finite in number and the object could be falling into one of those categories, like which genre, which genre the song belongs to, possibly that could be a multi-level classification. But if one object is going to fall into one of the many categories, but it can't take the infinite number of values, then it's a classification problem. Okay. Fine. So today what we'll do is that we'll take up one example where we will try to train our model. So we'll take a classification model and we will take a data about the which contains the images of the handwritten digits. So we have several samples of 1, 2, 0, 3 written by hand by different people. So we want to train the system in identifying that whether this number is 5 or 6 or 7. So we are trying to train our algorithm in reading those digits, the handwritten digits. Okay. And then we'll come back to understanding that how do we assess that whether my classification is good or bad, and how do we improve the classification. So here the parameters that we will use for classification would be different compared to regression. So in regression, we were using two parameters mainly. One was the RMSE and the second was the R square to assess whether the performance of the algorithm is good or not. When it comes to classification, then we need to use other types of performance parameters, which would be accuracy, that how accurate my prediction is. So if I classify a very good customer as a very good customer, then my classification is good. So depending upon how many times I have classified the object into the right category, I will assess my accuracy. I will come back to this because it is somewhat more complex to understand. That is, I mean, not complex to understand, but the terms are actually, you will take some time to grasp that what, how the accuracy of the classification exercises are getting assessed. The accuracy is one of the parameters, recall, precision. So these are the terms that we will come to. So let's first run the exercise, and then we will come back and see that what are the different parameters which will we use for assessing or evaluating our model. Okay, so let's go to our data set. Okay, so first thing that we do is the imports. So I import pandas, numpy, matplotlib for visualization, and I just want to suppress the warnings. So I have also imported the warnings library. Let me make it slightly bigger so that it's easier on your eyes. Okay. So first we import the data set. This data set is available in the sklearn library itself. So from sklearn.datasets, we import fetch open ML. That is the class, or that's the function with which we can fetch different databases, which is contained in the sklearn library itself. So this MNIST 784 is the name of the data set, and we need to supply the version also. So I am importing the version 1 of the MNIST 784 data set and storing that into a variable, which is a digit, which I name as digit. Since it is a variable, the name could be anything, A, B, C, whatever. It will take some time to import the data. So I have imported the data set now. Now we want to see that what is there in the data set. So we say digit.keys. So that data set actually contains a lot of files. It has got data, it has got target. Target is which will contain the labels. So labels are also called target at many point in many cases. Basically, it says that you have to find out what the target is or what the classes are. And there are certain other names, that is the feature names, the target names, description of data, and so on. Okay. After that, we take the data into X and target into Y. So we say X, Y is equal to digit data and digit target. It means that the uh, data part of the digit file that we have obtained will be stored into X, and the target would be stored into Y. Okay. And let's see what is the shape of the X and Y, or what kind of information it obtains, and then I will be able to explain that why I am using the as type as int for Y. So what do we do? X info will give me the information about what are the different features that we have, because X contains the features. So X and Y we have not yet done. We'll first do that. Okay. So info is not working here because what we have got is an array, and info is a command that you can put on the uh, data frame. So it also tells you here that what is the data type that we have received here. So X is actually an array, okay, and Y is also an array. So this is the kind of array that we have got, okay. So you have a series of but X dot shape. So you see here the data that we have got in X is 70,000 observations we have. It means that 70,000 records we have, 70,000 examples of the handwritten digits that we have got, and there are 784 attributes for each uh, observation. So if you compare that with the housing data that we had taken, that was approximately 20,000 into 10, 20,000 observations, and there were 10 features of the house. If you see in the digit database, the size of the file or size of the data that we have got is actually much larger. So we have got 70,000 different observations. It means that it contains the images of 70,000 digits. Some of them could be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And each of these has 784 attributes. So these attributes are the pixel values. So if we draw an image, the image is comprised of pixels, and this is a black and white image. So what the system has done is that for each pixel contained in the image, it is taking the pixel value. So if it is completely black, then it is taking a value of 255. If it is white, it is taking a value of 0. Okay, and depending upon the between a scale of 0 to 255, given the intensity of the um, pixel, it is assigning some value, and those are the values which are contained in the 784 attributes. So each attribute represents one pixel. So our data set is fairly large this time, 784 into 70,000. Okay. Now this 784 represents, this is a 28 by 28 image. So when we draw an image, maybe once I show you how these images are, let's see here. So first, let's get an understanding of how these images are. Okay. So what do you make out? This looks like the image of a handwritten um, digit, and it appears to be 5. So if I reduce the image size here, it will give you a better clarity. Okay, sorry. This was the reshaping of the, this is not the image size, my fault. So it is taking the default size. Let me introduce. Okay, so this small image actually becomes much clearer. This is the data that you have got. Okay, we are seeing the first record. Let me show you some random record. So I'll also, you will also see that how we get the random data. So I get, say, a random number is equal to So let's understand this one. So what I'm saying is that get a random number, any random number between 0 and 70,000. Why 70,000? Because I have got 70,000 records in my data. So it will pick up any one of them randomly, and I'm assigning that value to n. Then we are saying that in array X, get the nth record. This is how we fetch the a given record from an array or a list. So we say that from array X, get the nth element and store that to image. That image, as we have seen, contains 784 features, or these are the values of the 784 pixel. Now we are saying to be able to display that as an image. So if you see, it's just giving me values of all these 784 pixels. But if I want to draw an image, I am putting a reshape command. It means that put that into 28 by 28. So rather than having all in one row, put that into a two-dimensional array, 28 columns and 28 pixel, 28 label, 28 columns and 28 rows. This 784 is getting reshaped into another array of two-dimensional array, which will be having 28 columns and 28 rows. And so with that, I am plotting it. So here it is easy to make out that this is 6. If I run it next time, I will see some more values. So we get 3, and the different images, it is possibly 0. Now here, this one could be a bit difficult to recognize, but we looks like that it's also a 0, although it is not very clear. Now this one looks more like 5, but could be 6 also. This is clearly 1. So we can see different images which I have got in my database. Now we will train the algorithm today to identify which image is this, whether this is 5 or 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, that we are able to identify very easily because we have trained our eyes over several years in identification of these digits. But today we will train the algorithm to identify what these digits are. And you will see that as when we were children, then it took us several months and maybe a few years for us to really become very confident about identification of these digits, and how much time the parents and the teachers spent on us so that we are able to identify these digits. But we will see that we will now train the computer that within a fraction of the minute it will learn how to identify this digit. Okay? And that's the power I was talking about, that given the power of the computation nowadays that machines have, and the power of these algorithms, many tasks, even in the areas where it was earlier used to be only of area of human intelligence, like learning how to read a number, as human beings, as children, we take several weeks and months, and in some cases even years, to get familiar with these numbers and become very confident about identifying these numbers. But we can train the machines in a jiffy, in less than a minute or so, by showing it some 70,000 odd samples and telling them that out of those 70,000 samples that these are the digits. Then it starts recognizing what these digits are. So that's the power of machine learning we will see here today. So let's come back to our database. What we have got in our database is 70,000 records, and each of them is having 784 different features. Okay. So let me see if I am already doing it later. Okay. Rather than going directly, let's spend some more time on this data set that we have got. Okay. So let's convert that X into a data frame first so that it's easier for us to manipulate and see. So what do we do? We'll call data frame. So PD dot data frame. PD is our pandas library. So from the pandas library, we call data frame function, and that it, to that data frame, we just give the X as input. So presently, if you see, as we saw, X was an array, numpy array. So we are giving the numpy array to the data frame function. Then it will convert that function. It will convert this array into a data frame. And now I can use all the functions of pandas very easily, because I would not be able to. Pandas operates on the data frame. So most of the commands that we have learned in pandas and all the data manipulation with pandas, it becomes much easier to do if I have the data available in a data frame. So let's convert that. And then after that, I can do all the operations that we have learned earlier. You can ask x dot shape, so it gives me the same result. I can now say x dot info. So x dot info, it says that range is 70,000. Now it is not showing me the column names as it used to show me earlier, isn't it? Because all the column names are actually from 0 to 783. So it is showing you the column names are 0 to 783 because names are not there. So as we had seen earlier, that in the array, you don't have the provision to put a column name. Okay. So what do we do? Let's see here. So we have got here feature names already available in digits. Okay. So the feature names are given, but it is given in another way. So if you see here, the feature names are given. And what are these feature names? It's just pixel 1, pixel 2, pixel 3, pixel 4. Okay. We can bring these names into our data frame. How do we do? So these are given in the form of a list. If you see, the list will start with the bracket. So now we can put that as the column headers in my data frame. So we got X here, which is not containing any label. Okay. So what we will do is that we'll add, what do we do? X dot columns is equal to digit dot feature names. And then after that, let's ask for x dot info. Okay. So since the numbers are very large, it's just showing you that now our column names have changed. It is pixel 1 to pixel 784. And that we can see by just asking for x dot head. So that will show us what is the data in X. You see, this is the kind of data we have got. Okay. So we are doing some very basic function in pandas. We have got an array. We have converted that array into a data frame. Then we have given the column headers to the data frame. So column headers was already available to us, and we have applied that. And so first, when we saw X was not having any column header, and now we have put the column header by giving this command. So x dot columns is equal to digit dot feature name. And this is possible because when we replace the columns, what it expects is a list of column names. And since digit dot data feature names is already given, as you can see here, in the form of a list, we can directly use that. Otherwise, you may have to convert the data available into a list, and then we can directly replace as x.columns is equal to whatever is the name of the list. One condition would be required, that the number of columns should be equal to the number of elements that we have in the list. So now I have got my data frame X, where we are seeing this value, that maybe pixel uh, 1, 2, 3, 4 is all showing 0, 0, 0. And at some places, I am sure that it will have some value. So for example, you can see pixel 745 is 147, 252, 42, and so on. Why is that happening? Because in the images that we have seen earlier, in these images, there are a lot of blank spaces. So these blank spaces are having the value of 0. And all these places where we have this gray or black markings, that is where it will have some value. And that value is the intensity of the pixel that we have. So if it is completely dark, it will be having a value closer to the 255. And if it is not that dark, for example, a few pixels are a bit gray, so those values will be, lower than 255 and closer to 0. That's what the data we have got. Now, if you see all this data of the different pixels in an image, it's all given in just one row. But when we are processing the image, or when we want to see the image, we'll convert that into 28 by 28. So it will have, so the way that we have done here, that in this image, we have 784 pixels, but I have converted that into 28 rows and 28 columns. And that's how we can draw the picture. So we convert that 784 and we reshape that, and we make that 28 by 28, and then we are able to draw the picture. Okay. So now I have fair understanding of what the data I have got. Now, how do we proceed about training the algorithm? We will follow the same process as we have done in regression. So in regression, after I had got the data set, so we spent a lot of time in regression in trying to clean. We were doing a lot of processes in data munging, data wrangling, filling up the missing values and so on. In this data set that we have got, I don't have a problem because all the data is available. So there is no missing data here. So now if I have got the data set ready for processing, what is already available to me, so I don't have to do the backfilling, and it does not have, so all the 74 records, if you see, it is a float. So there is no question of any, I mean, in this data set, there is no feature which is non-numeric. So I don't have to do any of the processes that I did in the housing data set. So assuming that I have got a clean data set now, and I have got that already bifurcated into X and Y, that is also one of the steps that we had taken in the housing data set. X and Y value was both in the same data frame. So we segregated that. But I have been given it in a X and Y format because the data that I read, it was having the data and target stored separately. So I brought the data and the target into a single format. So now I have got the data ready for running my algorithm. The question I'm trying to ask you is that what should be our next step? So can you recall from the regression that what should we do now? Having got the data set, having segregated that into X and Y, what should we do now? You can attempt answering that either by unmuting yourself or on the chat window. What should we do now after I have got X and Y? Just try out your answer. Being wrong is okay. So these are the steps I would urge you to completely, you should have a very fast recall of the different steps that we have in the predictive data science process. So just so that you remember it very well, I will repeat that. So the first thing that we do, okay, so Rishabh is responding that test. Yes, so I think what you mean is that segregate this data into training and testing. So once I have got the data, then I need to segregate that into training data and testing data. Okay. And we will run the training algorithm only on the test data. And after that, it will give me the estimator. I would have fine tuned my algorithm. Then I will say that, okay, now the real test lies in if you are able to make good predictions on the test data. So having got this, we will split the data into train and test. Okay. So what I will do is that I have converted only X into a data frame and not Y. So I will do that also so that both of them are the same type. So I insert the code and then I say Y is equal to PD dot data frame and I just put here Y. And at the same time, I can also put the feature, the column names here. So here the columns would be, we have also got the, so here we have feature name, we have target names. So I'll put digit.target names is what we'll take as columns here. So either I can give in two steps or I can give the column names in the same step. So I say column names is equal, columns is equal to digit dot target names. And then we'll see what Y is. I think it should work. So you see here what we have got in Y. The level name is given as class, and it shows you that the first digit is 5, second one is 0, third one is 4, and so on. So we can also now check uh, what our values are. So I would rather than taking a random value or let's print what this value is. So we are taking a random value and we are getting the value. So we converted this into carrier 68921. We have got 70,000 records. So what's the problem? Okay. So here I want to just actually print here n, not the image. Image is equal to, okay. So we have converted this actually into a data frame now. So this will not work. 2725 that I got here. Okay, so data frame object has no attribute reshape. What we'll do is that maybe I'll image dot reshape. So we are changing the shape, the data type of X, and that's why some of the commands will have to be changed. So here data size is changed from 784. We should be having just 784. Okay. Yeah. So 1093, it takes the random number 1093. This 1093, if you want to see in Y, what is the value of so let's take 1092. You see 1093 is actually 0, and what is being shown, but here it is what X 1093 is actually 5, but the label is 0. So in some cases it could have uh, wrong labels also. Let's see the first one. So the first record is showing as 5. We'll put here also. Okay, here we had actually taken the first record. So we are actually selecting the first record and not this random number. The first record is 5. We have taken the first record from X, and the first record in Y is also the same. So if I say here the second record is 4, and if you put the same thing here, then we get here 4. So we are able to validate that whether what is the label given and what is the actual figure. So we are saying that the we saw 4, we saw 5, and so on. So now we have got the X data, we have got the Y data. The next step that we do, we'll come to these things later. Okay. So let's go manually one by one. So after that, what we do, we say here we'll first import. So from sklearn dot, these are the libraries that you may have to recall. Sklearn dot, if we use model selection, we import train test split. Okay. So having imported the train test split, now you'll say X train, X test, Y train, Y test is equal to train test split. So it's always a good habit to actually get the prompt other than typing out, because it will save you a lot of mistakes that we may do in typing. So how do you do? If you are using Colab, then if you, after typing say a few letters, if you wait, then it will give you some hint. Otherwise, you can press Control and space. If you press Control space, then it will fetch the recommendations for you. So I'll use train test split. Then as you give the parenthesis, it will, it should also prompt you that what the, what would be the syntax of. So here we know that we have to give x, we have to give y, and then we'll say test size is equal to 0.2. Okay. So now this function will split x and y each into two files. The training set will contain 80% of the data, and the testing set will contain 20% of the data. Okay. After that, we'll like to also see very quickly what is the shape that I have got of these things. So xtrain dot shape, x test dot shape, y train dot shape, and y test dot shape. Okay. So we are importing the train test split function. Then we are giving the parameters as x, then y, and I am saying this split that in the ratio of 20/80. And then we are seeing that after the split, what is the shape of each of these four files that we get. So earlier we had 70,000. Now we see that it has been, each of the x and y have been bifurcated into two files. The training sample has got 56,000 and the testing sample has got 14,000. Similarly for y, so corresponding to x train, I have y train, which has only one attribute, which is the level. Okay. So having done this, then what do we do? Now we would select a model. So now I have I got the data. That data we bifurcated into, or we got the data in a shape where the features and the labels were already separate. So I had x and y. Then I came and split that x and y into train and test. And then we import the classifier. So just as we had done earlier, imported the model. Now we will import we had earlier imported the model for regression. Today, since we are going to run a classification exercise, we will import the model for classification. So again, just as we had the linear regression, we'll also call here. So from sklearn dot linear model, import logistic regression. So logistic regression is actually a classifier. So even though it is a regression, what logistic regression does is that it the output would be a continuous value, but then we apply a function so that it becomes, the value becomes either 0 or 1. So that's why it runs a regression, but the output would be, so it is still a part of the linear model, but the transformation is being done towards the end. We'll explain about that later. So logistic regression is also one of the classifiers. Okay. So having imported that, what do? We will create an instance of that. Okay. So we'll create an instance of that. And now I have created an instance. And that instance I'm calling as model. So on this model, we can call the fit function and the predict function. Okay. Then I will take this instance, and then say fit. What is the data that we give to fit? It will be my training data now. We'll give X train and Y train. Okay. So what does the fit function does? So when we do the fit, it will optimize all the parameters. Okay. So the training of the model is happening with the fit function. So it will train the model and it will find out all the parameters which will be used in the classification process. And then we will call the predict function, isn't it? So let's first train this model. Giving some warning about why. Okay. Okay. It has given me some warning. We'll check that whether it has done the job or not. Okay. So logistic regression, I suppose it has been trained, and then we'll call the predict function, model.predict, and we want to make this prediction on X test. And let's see what this prediction contains. So if you see, the system has made some prediction on the X train data. It has made that the first element is 9, the second one is 6, and third one is 3, and so on. Okay. Now, if you want to see the corresponding data here from Y, so this is the prediction on the X train. Let's see X test. Let's see what does Y test contain. So Y test appears to be some very odd numbers. So let's see. So I have got my predictions here because it shows me some error that it was expecting an array and we have given a column. We'll see that. And then we call the prediction function. Let's see whether the predictions have come correctly or not. So we have done the prediction, and then we will use the confusion matrix here. So here we have not gone into the what kind of performance parameters that we should use in the context of classification, but we will reach there in just a moment. So first I have to also import the metrics function. So from sklearn dot metrics. Yes. Okay, so it is the cross-val score, cross-validation score. So it should come here. SK. So there is spelling mistake here. Let's see. Okay. Cannot import cross var score. Just so these library names, even I get confused many times. So okay, it is sklearn.model selection, not really sklearn.model selection. Import cross var score, not from sklearn.metrics. Okay. Then for the performance, I think we are also importing cross var score. Is there any other import here? One import I think we are missing here. Yeah. From metrics also we need to import from dot metrics. So here we have used the name as spread. This prediction we did on X test, isn't it? Prediction we used X train I have used here. So that's why. So I made the prediction on X train and I'm comparing that with X test. So that's okay. Okay. Now sorry. So I had made the prediction on the training data itself, and that's why this problem was there. So now if I make the prediction on X test, I have stored that in prediction, and that array comes as 52739. And if you see what data I have in Y test is 527, and then maybe some other numbers were. So then I'll take this. Okay, now we are fine. Okay. So what we have got now, let's go through the process once again, which is very similar to the process that we followed for regression. We got the data as X. So we got the data for X, which is the features. We got the data for Y, which is the labels. So I have got the data and the target. Okay. Now to see some data in a better fashion, we converted those into data frame. But if you don't really need to see that or do any operation on the data frame, we could actually just leave it like that also, because all our models, they work with the data frame and they will also work with the arrays. In fact, they will work much faster with the arrays than with the pandas data frame. But still, we converted that into data frame so that we can see the columns and labels and what is inside the data in a much better fashion using the pandas data frame. But this step is not really a must. So if you have got an array, we could just operate with the array itself. So we got X, we got Y. Then we saw what is contained in our file. And since we have been given information about 784 pixels, and the image has to be drawn in a in a uh, 2 by 2 shape. I mean, and therefore we converted this into 28 by 28. So 784, if you multiply 28 by 28, it becomes 784. So the 784 pixels that we got, we have reshaped that into 28 by 28 matrix, and that is how we are able to plot. Then we see that what are these numbers and what kind of images that we have got. Having got a feel of what is my input data, that is what is my x and what is y, and what does it contain. So it contains the pixel data based on which we can draw the image. So these are the images photograph which has been given to us in a flattened fashion. Then we take the next step. We split both x and y into train and test. That's what we did here by calling the train test split function. And then we saw that we gave the information to it that split this in 80 and 20 ratio. So 70,000 has got a split into 80% is 56,000 and 20% is 14,000. So now I have got x train, x test, y train, y test. Next step, we import the model, or we import the algorithm, and then we create an instance of that. So we import logistic regression and we create an instance of that. And so by naming logistic regression and putting the parenthesis here, we are able to instantiate that, and that name of the instance we are giving as model. Having created the instance, now we train the model, and we train the model with the fit function. So we say model.fit, and then to that fit function we give the training data, because we are in the training process. So we give x train and y train. Now the model trains, and then we make the prediction. For making the predictions, we call the predict function on the model object. So model.predict, and we can make the prediction. We want to make the prediction on the test data. So I give x test here. Last time I had given x train, so it has made the prediction for the x train also. But what we want to see is that how the model has performed on the testing data. And that's why when I give x test, now all the predictions about each number, that is how the system has read those numbers, is stored in a variable called predict. So this one is an array. So if I see here the values, so for the first object that it got, it made a prediction that this number is 5. And then if you want to see this side by side, what we can also do is that maybe just convert this into a data frame. So we'll say P is equal to PD dot data frame, and we'll put head here, and we put column name here as prediction. And then what we'll do is that we'll concatenate both the prediction and the actual data which is contained in y-test and see it side by side. So we just give a name of df is equal to, now how do we do that? Concat. So we can concat both the files. So I can concat here y-test and p, which is the data frame we have got, and we'll concatenate column by column. So we'll define axis is equal to 1. And then we say we want to see what is there in df. Okay. So here in the concatenation, it is this problem we had faced earlier also. So you see the concatenation is done based on the row IDs. And if you see here in the Y test, if I see, the row IDs are from the original data 917036573 and all that. So, and in the prediction, since that is the newly we have created, it is actually the, if you see here P, this will have the row values as 0, 1, 2, 3. So if you see the row index is 0, 1, 2, 3, and therefore when it is matching, when we are concatenating, when we are concatenating by column, it will actually try to see and concatenate based on the matching of the row index. Okay, so some of these errors, when you see, it actually gives you an insight into how the system functions. So P has got the row indexes as 0, 1, 2, 3, whereas Y has got the row indexes, which was some random numbers. And why that number was a random number? Because as we divide the data into train, test, split, the 20% and 80% division is based on the randomization process that we do. So it takes some random 20% of the records and puts that into test, and random 80% of the records that is put into train. So this process also, you should be aware that when we do the train, test, split, it follows a random process, and that's why we have some got random numbers for the row IDs when we were seeing the Y test. And that is the reason that when we concat, it is not really concating well, because it is looking for the same row IDs. And if those row IDs are not available, it is saying not a number, or these numbers are not available. So in that case, we need to re-index one of them. I mean, we'll have to re-index the Y, and then we will be able to concat there. So I will go into that tomorrow, that how do we realign the index, because you have to go through some other commands, like how do you set the index and how do you reset the index. I will not go into that right now. Let's try to see what is the result that we have got. So first we called for the confusion matrix. I will explain the confusion matrix tomorrow, but what actually it says is that how many times a zero has been predicted as zero, how many times what was actually one has been predicted as one. So these are the numbers which we are seeing here. Okay, and the rest of it has actually got an error. It means that this number is actually showing me that how many times it was actually zero but was predicted as one, so that did not happen. How many times it was actually zero but the system made a prediction as seven. So in 7 cases, as two. So in 7 cases, the actual number was zero, but the prediction made was two. So system thought that it was two, actually it was zero, and that happened 7 times. So that's how the confusion matrix is actually drawn, and we will try to understand this in more detail tomorrow. Just let me see if I can give you the accuracy number, and then we'll close the session today after giving you the accuracy numbers. And we'll try to understand that how do we arrive at the accuracy and all that. So yeah, so this is also lm.score x test by test. So let me call this function, and then we will. The x train, x test, y test we already got. We'll just wait for 1 minute to give it the result, and then we'll close the session today. Yeah, I think there is some problem with the connectivity here. It's not showing connected. Just let me interrupt it. So here that is, doesn't appear to be connected here. Okay. Yeah, now it is connected, and let me try to. Okay. It is taking a longer time. What we'll do is that now we have trained the model, we have got the prediction. What we are waiting for is to see the accuracy and the result. So one of the things that we see is uh, how accurate the data is. So if you just go down this diagonal, that shows that how accurately each of these numbers have been predicted. So zero, which was zero, it has predicted 1,368 times correctly, and all these numbers is the incorrect prediction. So in case of 1,01485 times it made a right prediction, and these are the numbers it made a wrong prediction. So as you can see that compared to the right prediction, the wrong predictions are actually a bit less. We'll go into the exact computation of the accuracy in the case of classification tomorrow. So if there are no questions today, we can end it. And having gone through the process of the classification, we will do a quick recap tomorrow, and then we'll go into how do we evaluate our classification models and what are the different parameters of evaluation that we use for classification that we'll study tomorrow. If there are no questions, then we can close the session for today, and we'll meet again tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Is that fine? Sure. So I will go slowly tomorrow, but having done one regression and one classification, I am sure that you will understand the complete process of how do you run a machine learning model for making predictions. Okay. So we'll do that tomorrow. Okay, thanks. We'll meet tomorrow again at 7.